it's predicted that the number of Muslims will outnumber the number of Christians in a couple of years. And there's lots of Muslims in Indonesia and other parts of the world.
Yes. You bet.
So why would Christianity be, like, you know, more right than, like,
Yeah, it's like super cool. I went back.
Why would Christianity be more
Yeah, if
right
you're
than
both
Islam?
ready.
Because the evidence is that Jesus Christ is more reliable than Muhammad.
In what way?
In what way?
Yeah.
When you look at the lifestyle of Jesus Christ, he never sinned once. In John chapter 8, Jesus looked in the face of his enemies and said, "Which one of you can prove me guilty of sin?" And his enemies were silent. So the lifestyle that Christ lived is unmatched. When you look at some of the sexual practices of Muhammad, they contradict what Jesus taught and how he lived. So you've got to make a decision. The character of Jesus Christ, is it so stellar, so pure, that it demands my trust? I think the obvious answer to that is yes. Second test for Christ, the content of his teaching. The Sermon on the Mount is ethical genius. Whoever gave the Sermon on the Mount is an ethical genius. Well, it was Jesus Christ. So when you read the ethical teachings of Christ, you've got to walk away saying, whoa, amazing. Thirdly, you watch him die at the moment of most excruciating pain as he's nailed to a wooden crossbeam. Instead of cursing his enemies the way I would have, he prays, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Wow, that's amazing. But fourthly, and most importantly, 3 days after Jesus died, he rose from the dead. And over a period of 40 days, he appeared to over 500 people who saw him risen from the dead. That historical resurrection sets Christ apart. Now, the third point in answer to your excellent question is, if it is true that the reason I'm a Christian is because I grew up in a Christian culture, then what you're saying is, the reason you are whatever you are is because you grew up in that type of culture. So if you're a secularist, the reason you're a secularist is because you grew up in a secular culture. Now, in my observation of human beings, those who I respect most, like the Gandhis, Dr. Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln, those people contradicted their culture. They were heroes, and they brought about change. So the idea that I have to follow my culture in every way is not true. Now, does my culture impact me profoundly? Yes, ma'am. Of course it does. It's obviously why I'm dressed the way I am. Okay? So yes, culture and community impact us, but no, we're not slaves of our culture. Now, if a culture says, Cliff, in order for you to be part of our group, you have to murder. We're obviously talking about mafia culture, a gang culture. Do you think that it's wrong for me to murder, even though my culture is saying, in order for you to be accepted, you got to murder? I would insist all of us know down deep that regardless of whether our culture says murder is good, it's still wrong. We have rational minds. We have consciences that we can use to critique our culture. And we don't have to go along with our culture. And if you want to be part of a mafia culture or a gang culture, and in order to be accepted in that culture, you have to murder, I think that's a tragic mistake. Does that make any sense?
We're just gonna have to agree to disagree.
Okay, what do you think?
I don't know about the whole culture part, but just your reasons for Jesus Christ, for you, like, or believing in him over Muhammad, like.
Right.
I mean, you're basing his purity already on the fact that you believe in Christianity, like he sinned based on Christianity, but Muhammad might be pure for Muslims. Like, I don't.
No, ma'am. I don't base my view of Jesus on Christianity. I base my view of Jesus on the source documents, the New Testament Gospels. I don't base my view of Muhammad on 9/11. That would be narrow-minded bigotry. I base my view of Muhammad by reading the Quran and finding out, what did Muhammad teach? How did Muhammad treat people? So no, ma'am, that is not accurate to say that I turn to Christianity for my information about Jesus. I deplore the Crusades. I deplore the Inquisition. I deplore the Salem witch trials. I deplore all those Christian ministers that preached that the Bible teaches slavery is good, right here in Texas for years. That is deplorable. But what you've got to realize is that is not what the Bible teaches. That's not what Jesus taught. That is how Christianity has been perverted. And the same is true with Islam. To say, as some people have said to me, oh, Cliff, all I need to know about Islam is 9/11. That's sick thinking. That's bigotry. You want to find out about Muhammad, you don't go to 9/11 and see what some terrorists did to the World Trade Center. Instead, you better be open-minded enough to go to the Quran and find out, what did Muhammad teach? How did Muhammad treat people? And then you better make your decision on whether to trust Muhammad or not trust him based on who Muhammad was, not based on how Muhammad has been misrepresented by certain terrorist organizations like ISIS. And so, the same is true for Jesus. You better go to the source documents, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, if you claim to be an open-minded, tolerant thinker. And you better read those Gospels for yourself. And then you better ask yourself, does the historical evidence of the way Jesus treated people, what he taught ethically, how he died, and how he rose from the dead, does that point to Christ being reliable, or does it point to Christ being a quack? And if your conclusion is, the evidence is Christ is a quack, you better reject him. But if the evidence is that Jesus Christ is totally reliable, then you'd better put your faith in him, because he's the truth, the way he claimed to be. Does that make any sense?
Sure. Thank you.
What would you attribute to the rise in moral relativism in younger students or college students?
Good question. The appeal of moral relativism is strong for all of us. Moral relativism deifies my opinion. It's the exact temptation that Satan threw at Adam and Eve. Hey, guess what, Adam and Eve? If you eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you'll be like God. In other words, you'll be defining what's right and what's wrong. In other words, don't trust God to define what's right and wrong. You define what's right and wrong. Now, sir, that is tremendously attractive to me. I love to be the center of the universe. I love it when my opinion is respected by everybody and everybody agrees with me. I love to deify my own opinion. And so that's right there part of the power of moral relativism. It's the quickest way I know to deify my own opinion. Now, when you look at Jesus Christ and when you see how he treated people, gosh, I wish I treated people that well. I haven't. But he did. So his integrity is amazing. Secondly, when you read his ethical teachings, they have the ring of truth about him. In my best moments, I usually agree with Jesus. In my worst moments, I don't. I disagree. Then when you look at him dying on a cross, loving and forgiving his enemies, I've tried to forgive my enemies. It is incredibly hard for me. I have to do it over and over and over again if someone's hurt me bad enough. He forgives his enemies. But then when he rises from the dead, and over a period of 40 days, he appears to over 500 people who see him risen from the dead, all of a sudden, I'm a fool. I'm an idiot if I don't trust him. Why? Because the evidence is he is so much more credible, trustworthy, reliable than I am. Is my main problem in life, I just really don't know the right thing to do? No, sir. My real problem is, I know what the right thing to do is, and I don't do it. That's why I need Christ. You see, Jesus did not divide the world into the good people and the bad people. Good people on one hand, bad people on the other. He didn't do that. Instead, Jesus divided the world into Those people who are self-righteous, do not acknowledge their need for God, versus those who are humble and realize, I need God's help. That's why Jesus started the Sermon on the Mount with the words, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. To be poor in spirit means, I realize, I'm not better than you. I'm not better than anybody. I have a real problem with evil. God have mercy on me. Help me. I need your grace. And that's what Jesus Christ offers. And I think a lot of us know this intuitively. We hate religious hypocrisy. We hate someone who pretends to be superior and to have their act together. And, oh, I'm a better person than those wicked people over there. Oh, give me a break. You put yourself in their circumstances growing up in the home they did, you'd probably be doing the same thing, man. But when we meet someone who really understands, I've done evil, I got a problem with evil, and I want to grow, wow, that's impressive. Well, that's what Jesus Christ says is so important. Get in touch with your own moral fallibility. Don't hide behind some self-righteous, hypocritical religious game.
No.
Acknowledge that you're a sinner, and Christ says, I bled and died on a cross to forgive you, to reconcile you to God, and to give you eternal life. That's exciting.
Yeah, evolution doesn't function until life already exists. So it's an entire non sequitur to bring up origin at all.
The reason I have to do that is because on every single university campus that I've spoken on for the past 39 years, some students and occasionally some faculty have argued that the reason they are an atheist is because evolution explains everything.
That's stupid. Sorry.
I happen to agree with you.
As someone who doesn't believe in God, that's a terrible position.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
But I mean, and then like a little bit further along in that conversation, we were talking about how altruism cannot be explained by evolution, by contrast, and I do disagree with that.
Okay.
This kind of ties in a few different points that have been made, so sorry, bear with me. So you brought up that if this thing is just a chemical reaction in our brain and that it's not real,
right,
et cetera, to me, if our experience of reality is based on chemical reactions in our brain, regardless of whether God exists or not, that's still a real feeling. I still really love my mom, and the knowledge that interacting with her increases the serotonin and oxytocin in my brain doesn't change the fact that I genuinely love her, because those chemical reactions are my experience of this thing we call reality.
Okay, when you say, I love my mom,
Yes.
who's the I and what is love?
I am the being that exists inside of this body, and the love is just the interactions, the emotional response I have to her in the regards of how I feel how I should respond to her actions, my consideration for her well-being in my daily life, like how I go about my relationship with her is what that love is.
Okay. I would argue that if there is no God, the person who believes that is limiting reality to matter and energy.
Okay.
Which means there is no I that is separate from the chemicals.
I agree.
Okay? So I is not a person, I is chemicals.
I am a person composed of chemicals.
That's all. You're just your chemicals, right?
I have yet to find sufficient reason to believe otherwise.
Okay.
I am leaving room open to, because I know I don't know everything, I leave room open to change my mind.
Okay, well, I respect that. I hope that's true for me as well, right? We want to follow wherever the evidence leads.
I didn't mean to imply that you don't.
Oh, no, I know you did. It's a delight talking with you, sir. I really appreciate it, okay? All right. My experience and observation is that my wife does not have to love me.
Agreed.
The amazing thing about my wife is that she chooses to love me in spite of the way I misbehave at times. I would insist that that is a free decision my wife makes. I would insist that my dad did not have to spend time with me and love me.
Yeah.
My dad could have been a deadbeat dad. My dad could have lost his life in the business world in Manhattan where he worked, the way a lot of my classmates' dads did, and ignore me the same way my buddies' dads ignored them. They got up early in the morning, went into Manhattan, came back late at night, didn't spend time with their kids, didn't have any interest in it. Kind of a negligent dad. My dad chose to spend time with me, to love me. I would insist he didn't have to.
Yeah.
All right? Let's say that I see a guy walking around the corner of that building. He's got a little bit of balding hair, got a big stack of books under one arm, and when I see him, I haul back and hit him as hard as I can. I'm hauled into a court of law, and the judge says, Cliff, what did you do? That was a professor. He was walking around the corner with his books, going to class, and you just haul back and hit him? And if I were to say, Your Honor, when I was a little kid, my dad had a little bit of hair, and he would abuse me by picking up a book and slapping me over the head. And when I saw that professor, he just so reminded me of my dad that I had to haul back and hit him. See, the legal system in the United States is based on the freedom of the individual to choose. And the judge is going to look me in the face and say, well, Cliff, I'm sorry that your father abused you that way, but you had no right to slam a professor because he reminded you of your abusive dad. And here's the penalty. See, that's based on a view of humankind that says you're not just a complex chemical reaction, you're a human being with a free will, which means you are responsible for the decisions you make.
To me, being a conglomeration of chemical reactions doesn't take away from the fact that there are consequences to our actions. Like I don't see how those things are mutually exclusive or how that's answering the question of what love is.
I'm sorry. The only thing that's mutually exclusive is if I'm just chemicals, I don't have a free will. I just do what my chemicals program me to do. It's the behaviorism of B.F. Skinner.
And part of the chemical reactions in the process of your brain to reach the results that you enact with your body is the laws of the land, the things that we have decided as a society are acceptable. So, I am admittedly jumping to the end to kind of reel it back in, because I've heard this argument several times of if we don't accept free will, if we're just chemical reactions, we can't hold anyone accountable for their actions. But for me, the reactions in your brain aren't just rely on the input of information, your processing of that, your input of whether it's sight, sound, etc., and your processing of that information. And part of that information you're processing is what is socially acceptable in this interaction. And
I would insist, if you're honest and look at your life, it's your relationships with people that are based on free will that are the most exciting things in your life. And I would insist, if the young lady who you've been dating and has said, I love you, if your dad calls you up tonight and says, I have been paying him $1,000 a week to love you, I don't think you're going to sit back and say, oh, that's cool. I don't think so.
Yeah, because
so
you entirely changed the situation.
No, I think there's more to it than that. Come on, man. You know very well that you treasure love. And if love is paid for by your dad for someone to love you, that is going to radically alter your relationship.
I got a question right there.
Yes, sir.
You say we got free will and all that.
Right.
Why is it that every time something bad happens, people consider that evil, but when something good happens, that's something from God?
No, sir. If I feed her lunch, I did a good deed. If I smack her, that's an evil deed.
Why?
Why?
Yes.
Because she's a precious human being created in the image of God. Not because she's Asian. She's not valuable because she's Asian. She's valuable because she's a human being created in the image of God, and God don't make junk. He makes human beings. And if I degrade her, that's evil.
But listen, you just said earlier that God separated the people, right?
What?
You said
I never said that.
You said he has people over here, and then there's people over here. You said you switched it up.
No, I didn't.
You did.
You misunderstood. All right? I never said that once. I said all human beings, be they Mexican, Caucasian, Latino, African American, African, we all have value. Why? Not because our culture says we have value. That's a ridiculous argument. We're valuable because God created us in His image, and God don't make junk. He makes precious, valuable human beings.
So then why are there children dying, at such a young age in, poor countries? I mean, why are there people experiencing so much more suffering than, we are here? I mean, we're very blessed to be here today. We're not blessed in the image of God. I mean, we're living a better life than a lot of poor children dying in Africa. I mean, why are we more valuable than them in God's eyes? Or are we not? Please correct me if you disagree.
I would strongly disagree with you that all Westerners are living better lives than all Africans or South Americans.
Really?
I think that's really absolutely wrong.
Wait, let's take an average and then answer his question.
Okay, I am convinced that material wealth is not an accurate description or a way to evaluate a successful life.
What about lifespan?
All right? What about lifespan?
Yeah, is that an accurate way to measure standard of living of like...
A standard of living, yes. But the value of a human life, the success of a human life, absolutely no way. And you see, that is one of the contradictions between Jesus and our culture. You're right. Our culture says you're valuable, you've got a successful life if you're comfortable and if everything's convenient. The Apostle John, who knew Jesus so well, writes in 1 John 4:10, "This is love, not that we loved God, but that God loved us and sent His Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins." Love, real love, sacrifices. To sacrifice is to give my life up for another. That's hard, isn't it? It's so easy to be self-absorbed. To give my life up for another is very difficult. But you see, the beauty of sacrificial love is it turns selfish relationships into beautiful relationships. It turns painful marriages into beautiful marriages. Real love sacrifices. In other words, real love initiates reconciliation. That simply means when I really love someone with a sacrificial love, when we have a breakdown in our relationship, I take responsibility for the wrong that I have done, and I seek to initiate reconciliation by saying, "Gosh, I'm sorry. Would you please forgive me for the wrong that I have done to you?" That is sacrificial love. It initiates in reaching out to another person who you've done wrong to, asking that person for forgiveness, and then working for peace, working for reconciliation. But a lot of people say, Cliff, this sacrificial love seems highly idealistic and highly impractical. Well, when you begin to grasp the fact that at the heart of the cosmos is a God who sacrificially loves you and me, that begins to change your view of reality. And you begin to understand that sacrificial love is at the heart of God. And when that's the heart of God, in order to know God, you accept His love, and then you begin to respond to His love. In other words, real love is mutual. Love is not just a one-way street. God loves you and me with a sacrificial love. He proved that in His Son, Jesus Christ. But now He calls you and me to respond to His love, for love is mutual. In order to build a deep love relationship, there has to be initiation and response. Initiation and response. And so you see, this love is not just idealistic and impractical. Because in our culture, there's a real misunderstanding of sacrificial love. And the misunderstanding is as follows. Sacrificial love contradicts justice. No, it doesn't. The God who is love is also a God who's just. Justice and love in the Bible are parallel. They run side by side. To love is to actively, sacrificially wish and work for the success of another. Well, what is justice? Justice is a respect and love for a person that will be shown in treating them fairly, treating them respectfully, acknowledging their value and dignity as a human being created in the image of God. You see, justice and love are not contradictory. They don't run perpendicular. They run parallel. They run side by side. I like the movie Glory. It's about the 54th Regiment from Massachusetts that fights in the Civil War on the side of the North. The 54th Regiment is commanded by an abolitionist named Robert Shaw. He's a white man, and the 54th Regiment is comprised of African American soldiers. Unfortunately, even in the North, there was a lot of racism. And Robert Shaw had to work very hard to get boots and uniforms for his African American soldiers. One day, those soldiers were to be paid. They all lined up, but suddenly they were told, instead of receiving the $13 that you were promised, you're only going to get $10. Well, the African American soldiers decided $10 is better than $0, so they lined up. Except for one young runaway slave named Tripp. Tripp ran up and down the lined up 54th Regiment soldiers, crying out, "Tear it up, tear it up, tear the check up." Guess what? We African Americans stop bullets just as well as white soldiers do. Tear it up, tear it up. At first, the soldiers were quiet, but suddenly they began to join in the chant of Tripp. Tear it up, tear it up. Suddenly they heard a gunshot go off. They turned to look at their commander, expecting to be disciplined. Instead, he said, "If you men are not going to be paid, I will not be paid." You see, Robert Shaw understood sacrificial love. He understood that sacrificial love is a commitment to others. It implies loyalty, such deep loyalty that you will sacrifice in order to be tied into a deeper, more profound relationship with the other. The cross of Jesus Christ is proof of God's sacrificial love. He gave his only Son, Jesus Christ, on the cross to die to pay the penalty for your wrongdoing, for my wrongdoing. Christ rose from the dead. That's why you can trust him, because the evidence is he's credible, he's trustworthy. Put your faith in Jesus Christ. You'll never regret that decision, for he loves you with a sacrificial love. I'm one of the pastors of Grace Community Church. We meet every Sunday at 9:30 for a service and at 5 p.m. for another service. We meet at 365 Luke's Wood Road in New Canaan at Grace Farms. I'd love to personally invite you to join us this Sunday for our 9:30 service, for our 5 p.m. service. Thanks for joining us for these few minutes. Have a great day.